Hey now, welcome back to Lone Star Mini Restoration. Today, I finally got my heel board, my Heritage heel board, new heel board, or sorry for the politically correct Rear Subframe Mount Panel. I finally got it in. So I am going to replace the new Magnum panel that I have with my Heritage panel. I spent a good part of the morning looking through my videos to look to see, one, where was I on the floor panel before I stopped and went on to something else, and two, to figure out, okay, how does this go together? This flange on the rear subframe mount, does it go inside or outside of the floor panel? It goes outside. I looked at all the old stuff. Oh, and one tip that I learned, a lot of people said don't throw anything away until you're done with the project. Well, I've taken that to heart. Here's the old rear subframe mount. What I did was I measured where all the spot welds were along the upper and lower flanges, and I basically, if you measure all the way across, the spot welds are basically between 1.5 and 2 inches. So that's what I used. What I did was if you can see here along the flanges, I've measured it off. So I started 1/2 inch from the edge. I put a white paint dot, and then every 1.5 inches I measured and I put a dot. So that's where my welds are going to be all the way. And 1.5 inches seemed to be the magic number because it worked out beautifully on both the upper flange and the lower flange. Now on the lower flange where it bends, I put 1.5, and then I went to 1 inch right here. And then I went to 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1 inch right here, and then 1.5 the rest of the way. And it worked out like a charm. Beautiful. The idea is I am going to burnish this area right here so that I don't have to remove the paint on the entire flange. I'd like to keep it as sealed as possible. So here I'm just going to burnish these particular dots, and I'm going to mark it on the car side as well. And that way I'll get a clean surface for welding, and I'll still have a lot of finish. Which, by the way, a question, if anybody out there knows, I would like to know, is this paint that comes on the Heritage panel, is it weldable primer? It doesn't look like it. I'm thinking it's not, but I figure I have to ask the question because I just don't know. If you know that, I would love to know. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I'm going to crack on. To reiterate, as well as my own memory, the reason I'm changing the Magnum panel out for the Heritage panel is because, look at that, I'm going to zoom in. See the fitment between the Heritage floorboard and the Magnum floor panel right there. I'm zooming into the center of the screen. That's a massive hole. That's a massive gap. I'm not happy with that. Yes, if I were better, I could probably fiddle it out and get it to fit just right, but that means I would have to cut it and kerf it and form it, and I didn't want to do that. So I just got a whole new panel, and that's just one location. The Magnum panel just does not work well, so it was worth $100 to get a brand new Heritage panel. Okay, another comment before I remove the Magnum panel is I was smart enough, and I'm so very glad I did this. This gap, there's a fairly large gap between the boot floor panel and the top of the rear subframe, this gap right here. So what I did, and I was glad I did this, I made spacer blocks out of wood. Measured the distance, and I made the blocks, and surprisingly enough, they're slightly different from left to right. So I marked them. This one's right hand, this one's left hand. The right hand, as you see, I went and found my blocks, and it fits nice. There's a nice snug fit. So I'm going to use these blocks. Right now I'm going to take the subframe off. I'm using the subframe as my template to locate the rear subframe mount. But I'm going to take the subframe off so that I can remove the Magnum panel and put that in. But I've got, again, the spacers are marked left and right. This one goes on the left-hand side, and this one's in the center up here. But I'll use these to space up, or down rather, right? The car's upside down, but you know what I mean. To space off the rear subframe mount from the boot floor. That way I get an exact location. Also, for what it's worth, my own memory is that These are 5/16 bolts. I can pull one out. 5/16 bolts, and you need at least 2.5 inches to go through the rear subframe and into the welded nut that's on the rear subframe mount. 2.5 inches, 5/16. Oh, fine thread, by the way, fine thread. The mounts on the rear of the rear subframe, 2 different sizes. On this trunnion, on the aft side, the bolts are also 5/16, which takes a half inch socket. But these bolts are also, one of them is 2.5, but the bolt on the front side of the trunnion is only roughly 1.25. 5/16, 1.25. So 2 different sizes on the trunnions, just FYI. All right, right now I have the floor panel cleco to the rear subframe mount. So what I've done is I've just used some scrap timber lumber to support the shelf, because once I uncleco it from the rear subframe, there'll be no solid support back here. So that's just to help keep it in place for now. Nothing substantial. Okay, right off the bat, in comparing the Magnum panel to the Heritage panel, there's definitely a difference in this curvature here. When I have the edges lined up, you know, face to face or edge to edge, this distance is much wider than this. This curvature right here is much shallower, or less deep, I should say, less wide, whatever you want to say, compared to the Heritage. So yes, I'm hoping the Heritage panel is going to fit much nicer. Okay, so this is really just a check fit. The floor, the boot floor is pretty gnarly, and so yeah. But right now, so the Heritage panel is in there, and look at this. This is beautiful. If you can see up there, earlier we saw loads of light coming through the gaps between the Magnum panel and the Heritage floor panel. And look at that. That's a beautiful fit. I am so glad I went with Heritage. Let's look at the other side. I haven't looked at it yet. All right. Same with the other side. The light coming through there is from the holes in the floor panel. But the fit with the rear subframe mount is beautiful. I'm so glad I went this route. Definitely. So here's what I've determined, and here's what I remember. When I took out the spot welds between the rear subframe mount and the back bench, I did a pretty bad job of it. But then again, all these panels in here are pretty. This is a patch panel, and it's pretty bad. We've got rust holes here. You come on back, we've got some major rust and patch panels all over the boot floor. Now, the center of the boot floor actually looks pretty good. However, I'm going to replace the entire boot floor. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tack this in for now, just to get the floor panel moving forward. And once it's more solid, then I'll focus on the rear boot panel. All right, so my goal now is just to mark the floor panel at all the same locations, where I marked the rear subframe mount. The idea is I will burnish these areas only and keep a lot of the black paint in place. And yeah. Okay, I'm going to wrap this one up. I think mentally I've caught up with where I was and where I'm going. So as you can see, I'm burnishing only small sections of these. I'm going to do that all the way around. I won't burnish the ones on the floorboard until I put the rear subframe back in and make sure that it's in the right location. And then I will do that. Then I'll take the subframe back out, burnish those areas, and then, but that'll be on the next video. So I did want to say real quick that I also have a new toy. Oh, this bad boy is heavy. So I'm going to make use of this. Even though my spot welding has improved with the MIG welder, this bad boy will help me get through the job. So I'm ready to go. I've got new panels. My spot welding has improved. I have a spot welder now, and yeah, it's all good. So mentally, I'm mentally caught up. Any input, as always, if there's anything, recommendations, things to consider, I'm all ears. Thanks, guys. Bye just now.